Um, Welcome to our guests and everyone who is joining the session today. My name is Ruby. I am a pre-award support coordinator for Sponsored Programs Foundation at Cal Poly Humboldt. This session is being sponsored by or hosted by Cal Poly Humboldt Sponsored Programs Foundation, or SPF. We are pleased to host this session to bring awareness to a fellowship opportunity for students who are interested in pursuing graduate studies in STEM-related fields. Today we'll be hearing from two program directors from the Graduate Research Fellowship Program, also known as the GRFP, which is a program through the National Science Foundation, which supports graduate students pursuing full-time research-based master's and doctoral degrees in science, technology, engineering, mathematics, or STEM, as well as in STEM education. You're more than welcome to apply to the GRFP on your own, but SPF is also offering an opportunity to enroll in a course funded through our office to support up to 10 students in completing their applications. The students who took this course last year had overwhelmingly positive things to say about the experience, which includes videos, feedbacks on drafts, a flipped classroom, and one-on-one advising. So if you are interested, you can find the application on our engagement hub, which I will link in the chat shortly. The application will be posted within the next week or two, so just keep your eye on that. You can begin the course anytime between mid-June and mid-August. Just note that it is right at the beginning of this fall semester, so you want to talk to your faculty mentor, ideally before summer break, to apply for a spot in the program as soon as possible. And the actual GRFP application, those are due in October. Now to introduce our guest speakers. Dr. Joel Schildbach has been working as a program director in the Division of Graduate Education in the National Science Foundation since 2021. He joins the Division of Graduate Education from Johns Hopkins University, where he's a professor in the Department of Biology. Prior to joining the NSF, Dr. Schildbach served 6 years as Vice Dean for Undergraduate Education at Hopkins Krieger School of Arts and Sciences. His research focuses on genetic, biochemical, and structural aspects of plasmid and big biology. He earned his BA in microbiology from Oregon State University and was awarded an NSF Graduate Research Fellowship and pursued his graduate education at Harvard University. Our other guest speaker is Dr. Christopher L. Hill. He has been a program director in the Division of Graduate Education at the National Science Foundation since 2021. He is Professor Emeritus at Boise State University, where he served as acting dean and associate dean of the Graduate College. He serves on Convergence Interagency Working Group for a subcommittee of the White House Office of Science and Technology and the Executive Committee for the American Quaternary Association, and is a fellow of the Geological Society of America. During the presentation, please use the Q&A function on Zoom to submit any questions, and there will be time after the presentation for questions following. And so now I give the floor to you.
Well, thank you very much, Ruby. I'd like to also introduce two other members of the wonderful GRFP team here at the National Science Foundation, Dr. Ann Lemming and Renai, and they will be helping us today, especially when it comes to the questions, and they're the ones that organized everything. And so we're deeply appreciative to Annie and Ren for all their help, and we're grateful to be here today. As was mentioned, we're here to tell you about an amazing opportunity, an amazing funding opportunity for you connected with the National Science Foundation, or NSF, and it's with the Graduate Research Fellowship Program, or GRFP, and we're delighted to be here today. Just last week, we had the announcement for the last competition, and we were able to offer 2,552 fellowships this year, and maybe next year or a year after that, maybe you'll be someone that will get one of those fellowships. So let's look at the plan for your success and the future of science in the US. As I mentioned, this is the Graduate Research Fellowship Program that we're going to talk about. Within the National Science Foundation, GRFP is part of the Division of Graduate Education, which is part of the Directorate of STEM Education. And today we're going to try to give you kind of an overview of GRFP, what it's all about, and then Dr. Schildbach will focus especially on the main points connected with the application itself. There's no way that we can really tell you all the information that would be really valuable for you. So today's kind of an overview of some of the major ideas. But if you're interested and after today you think you're eligible to apply, here are some resources where you can go to find more information to help you build your future. So probably the main resource in terms of internet links is the bottom line on this one, www.nsfgrfp.org. Because if you go to that location, you can kind of find everything else. So that's where you might just take a screenshot of that, or remember nsfgrfp.org. You'll find lots of good information there. Today we'll provide you with an overview of some of it, but that's really the place to dig deep into some of the things we talk about today. So let's look at some people often ask, what is this picture connected with? Well, this is the picture of the National Science Foundation. We have the metro right in front of us. You see that? And this is a brand new building. It was built in 2017 for the National Science Foundation in Alexandria, Virginia, near Washington, D.C. Why don't we go to the next slide, which is just to kind of give you an idea of what we're going to cover. What we're going to do is a presentation first, and then open it up to your questions, and hopefully we can provide you with some initial information that will be about some of the things you might want to know about, and then if you have further questions, we'll try to answer some of those. So first, a little general information about GRFP, including a description of the program. And I'm going to focus a little bit on the eligibility part of GRFP, just so you have a good idea whether it's kind of worth your investment, whether you're someone that would actually be eligible for the fellowship. So that's kind of the first part of what we're going to talk about. And I'll also talk not only about eligibility, but about certain ineligible degree programs and ineligible fields of study. And then Dr. Schildbach will, in the second half of the presentation, go over the main parts of the application package. And the application is all done online, and there are all sorts of things to think about connected with that. Dr. Schildbach will give you the most important information connected with that, and also talk a little bit about what the reviewers look for in those applications. So let's get started and talk a little bit more about this amazing opportunity. What is NSF GRFP? Let's talk a little bit about it. Well, it's been around since 1952. NSF, the National Science Foundation, was started in 1950, but it took 1 or 2 years before they actually started giving away money. And one of the first programs that was funded and money sent to students was GRFP. So it's been around since 1952. It's a very important program. Over that time, over 70,000 awards have been offered to applicants just like you. And there are many, many wonderful stories about those applicants. Sometimes we highlight that about 40 of them have become Nobel laureates, and a little less than 500 have become members of the National Academy of Sciences. And that's one way of measuring the impact of GRFP. But each individual has made an impact, just like you can make an impact on the future of STEM and the future of how science impacts the rest of life. So what is NSF GRFP? Well, it's really about money for graduate education. And what we're talking about is for 3 years, you get a stipend of $37,000. And that's an increase, a little bit of an increase from the years past. So this coming year will be the first year that fellows get $37,000. And then one of the things we do here at the National Science Foundation is for the institution where you're going to go for your graduate education, we give them $12,000, and that's for what we call the cost of education allowance. And as a partnership with the National Science Foundation, what they do then is during the 3 years that fellows receive the annual stipend of $37,000, they also get a waiver in terms of the entire tuition. So even though NSF provides $12,000, what that translates to for the fellows is not only the $37,000 stipend, but also a waiver of tuition for those 3 years. And there's 3 years of financial support, but you can take those 3 years of stipend and tuition waiver over a 5-year period. So you can reserve 1 or 2 of the years if you'd like, if you have other funding. And people from all over the country, every state has people that apply, and every state has people that are offered awards. We have almost 9,000 fellows right now, and they're from every state. They come from, they apply from over 500 institutions, and they go to about 300 institutions. And the stipend is available and the waiver is available for people who are going into research-based masters and doctoral programs in eligible STEM fields. And if you look closely at the bottom right-hand part of this slide, you can see the major fields of study that are open for people to apply under. So you see chemistry, life sciences, psychology, computer sciences, materials research, social sciences, engineering, mathematical sciences, STEM education, geosciences, and physics and astronomy. So if you're in one of those fields or you're thinking about going into grad school in one of those fields, that's the first step in terms of thinking about GRFP as being something you might be eligible for. So that's a little bit about NSF GRFP. I'm going to talk about some of these things again. Let's go to the next slide and I'll emphasize a couple points connected with this. So let's describe the program in a little bit more detail. Let's go to the next slide. So again, let me emphasize it's $37,000 for 3 years. So that's, and then the $12,000 cost of education. So over the duration of the award, you get almost $150,000 for graduate education, $147,000. And remember that the fellowship also includes that tuition waiver from the universities, which is mostly paid by the institution except for that cost of education. And then if you get the fellowship, there are other opportunities at NSF that you might be able to apply for. So for example, Dr. Schildbach runs a program called Intern, GRFP Intern, and that allows a fellow to either while they're getting their stipend or even in the years, the 2 years out of the 5 years when they don't have the stipend, they can receive money from NSF to go on an internship in a non-academic setting. And that's an agency-wide, NSF-wide program, but one that for GRFP is run by Dr. Schildbach. And it's a really amazing opportunity. And we have to have some other opportunities that are connected with NSF. And if you get the fellowship, you're able to look into those and explore those as possible things that you might be eligible to take advantage of. So in a sense, it's all about the money. And that's what this slide mentions. Let's go to the next slide. Well, what is the benefit, or what are the benefits connected with GRFP? Well, first, it's awarded to you as an individual. You apply as an individual, and Dr. Schildbach will talk about that application package. But once you're awarded, the offer is made to you for a fellowship, you decide what institution you're going to, and then NSF sends the money to that institution, and then the stipend is paid through the institution to you. So that's kind of the process. And the great thing about this fellowship is that the choice of the project, the choice of the advisor, the choice of the graduate program, that's up to you based on some eligibility criteria that are part of the NSF program. So for example, it has to be in a STEM field, it has to be a master's program and thing, or a PhD program. There's no service requirements. So that means that compared to some programs here at NSF, after you get your money, after you graduate, you might have to work in a certain area or something like that. Well, there's nothing like that. It's unrestricted in terms of that part of the program. And as I mentioned, it's portable in the sense that you can use this in any accredited nonprofit U.S. institution of higher education, any U.S. university or college that has research-based master's and doctoral programs in the fields of study. And as I mentioned, just as we started this year, we've had 2,552 people offered an award. And that's a big jump from last year. So last year and for the previous years, we've had about 2,000. So prior to this year, the success rate was around 16 to 17%. This year, because we had kind of a jump in the number of fellowships we were able to offer, the success rate has actually increased. And so perhaps the next time we show this slide, because we just announced last week, so we just have brand new numbers, and you'll see that the success rate has actually increased. So over time, it's increased. It used to be about 12%. Now it's around 20%. Okay, so it's something that is within your grasp. It's something that if you invest your time and your effort, there's a good chance that you'll be considered for this great award. Let's go to the next slide, please. Well, what is the overall goal? If you're thinking about applying, what are you applying for? Well, the goal of the program is to select, recognize, and financially support individuals who've demonstrated the potential to be high achieving scientists and engineers early in their careers, so while they're grad students. And an important goal of GRFP is to broaden participation in science and engineering of underrepresented groups, including women, minorities, people with disabilities, and veterans. So those are the main goals. And when Dr. Schildbach starts talking about the application package and the different parts of it, you'll see that this is important to be thinking about. The goals are connected with financially supporting people that have demonstrated the potential to be high achieving scientists and engineers, and also to broaden participation in science. Let's go to the next slide, please. Okay, this is the last part for me. I'm going to talk about eligibility and ineligibility. So we'll start off with kind of the good news in terms of eligibility. Now, what I'm going to talk about is something you can see in the rule book that we used for last year. And these usually come out late in the summer, usually like in August, because the applications are due in October. And the rule book for this program is called a solicitation. And if you want to look at last year's solicitation, it's NSF 22-614. So the information I'm going to give to you today may not be exactly what will be in the next version of the instructions for the competition, but you can definitely know that it's going to be in October, and that in general, the rules in terms of eligibility are probably going to be pretty close to this. So let me go through some of the eligibility rules and then some of the different types of students that are eligible to apply. and some of the restrictions connected with those applications. So first, this is a federal fellowship at the National Science Foundation. So it's available to people that are US citizens, nationals, and permanent residents. Okay, so that's, if you go online to that site I mentioned, there's actually kind of a little app you can use. And that's the first question, right? Because if you aren't a US citizen, national, or permanent resident, there might be some other funding opportunities out there, but not this one. This one is connected with that as the first step. And then, as I mentioned before, it's for people that are early in their career. So you can apply as an undergraduate or early in your career as a graduate student. And I'll describe that in a little bit more detail in a minute. And you have to be pursuing a research-based master's or doctoral degree. So that means no professional degrees. And I'll describe some of those in a minute too. And it has to be in STEM, so science, technology, engineering, math, or STEM education. And when you go to grad school, you have to be enrolled full-time in the graduate program, and it has to be an accredited US institution. That means no international universities for this particular fellowship. So those are kind of the main rules. There are more details in the solicitation about that, but then you can think about this in terms of the different groups or levels of people that can apply. And so if you're an undergraduate senior or someone that has a bachelor's degree, but you have not started graduate school, you've not been part of a graduate program, you can apply for this program, okay? As long as you're going to be ready to start graduate school the next fall. So the applications are submitted in October, and the next fall, you need to be ready to go to graduate school. You can also apply if you are a grad student, but if you do, you can only apply once as a graduate student. As a level 1, as a senior or as a person with a bachelor's degree, you can apply every year that you're in that status. But once you're a graduate student, either a first year or a second year grad student, you can only apply once with that status. And we have special rules connected with that because there are different kinds of people that are grad students. And we mentioned that in this slide, but you can find a lot more of the details in the solicitation. There's one other category to mention, and that is someone that has got a master's degree already. That is somebody that might want to be come back to grad school after getting a master's degree. So this would be a person that does not have a doctorate and has had an interruption of at least 2 years since they've been in graduate school. Okay. And at the time you apply, so when you submit your application in October, you can't be in a graduate program already. So there are a couple important parts to that. And again, solicitation, in this case, solicitation 22-614 would provide a lot of details. So basically, the message is if you're an undergraduate or someone who's got your bachelor's degree, but has not started graduate school yet, you can apply this year. And then if you don't go to graduate school and you didn't get the fellowship, you can apply again and again and again. Once you're in graduate school, there are some restrictions connected with that. And the most important one probably is that you can only apply once while you're a grad student. So that's some information about eligibility. Now I'm going to talk a little bit about ineligibility, and then I'm going to hand it over to Dr. Schildbach to talk about the application package itself. So this is a STEM fellowship for science and engineering. And so there are some restrictions in terms of who can be funded and what kinds of degree programs are funded through GRFP. So for example, I mentioned professional degree programs. And what do I mean by professional degree programs? Well, like an MBA or a law degree or those kinds of things. So a JD, a DVM, those professional degree programs aren't funded through GRFP. And even if you were getting a PhD in a STEM field, but you were also combining it with a law degree or with a medical degree or something, those joint science professional degree programs are not eligible, okay? And then there are a couple things that are connected with kind of like clinical and community health kinds of things, counseling, social work. Those are not eligible. And then finally, if you were in a degree program in education or in history, you would not be eligible except if it's STEM education and except if it's the history of science. And again, one of the things you might say was, well, that's really a big question. Is my field eligible or not eligible? Well, you can look at the back of that solicitation that I mentioned. There's an appendix and there's a whole list of the fields of study for the current year. So you can see the major fields: chemistry, biology, psychology, social sciences, and then you can see the subfields. And you'll see that there's STEM education and the history of science as eligible fields. Okay, so that's some ineligible degree programs. And then there are also fields of study, and most of these are kind of connected with this thing I mentioned about the difference between something that's a research-related, research-focused master's and doctorate program and one that isn't. And if they're more applied types of things, especially in the health areas, funding through NIH is probably more appropriate than something typically at NSF and especially for GRFP. So research on health-related goals, and you can see here there are some fancy examples: etiology or disease and disorder, animal models, kind of drug development, testing, epidemiology, disease prevention, community, global health, clinical research in general, you might say, patient-oriented research. And then other examples would be outcomes research, health services, research connected specifically with clinical trials, and then things connected with agricultural production. Those are things that they're kind of off track in terms of GRFP, and that would include impacts on food safety. There are other places where you can find some funding for that, but really GRFP is not the place for that. So that kind of gives you I hope, a kind of overview of GRFP and some of the restrictions connected with the requirements. When we go to the next slide, you're going to see that it's the start of the information on the application package. I'm going to hand it over to my esteemed colleague, Dr. Schildbach, and let him give you all the important information for thinking about sending in your application to the National Science Foundation. So thanks for listening, and now you get to hear the good stuff about the application.
Oh, great. Thank you, Dr. Hill. So what you're going to see here in this list of items that need to be included in the application package is that it's not a trivial undertaking. And so that's why I would recommend you think about this course that Ruby described to you at the start of the meeting. But if we're thinking about the application here, when you enter into the portal and you start the process, there's going to be a form where you can put in your personal information, research experience, honors, awards, things like that. Then the things that require a bit more development. So there are two statements that are required. One of them is a statement on personal, relevant background and future goals. There's a separate statement on a proposed research topic or project. And then you need to include transcripts and letters of recommendation. Now, I believe, if we go to the next slide, we're going to get back around to these things here in a bit, but one thing you want to know going in is when are the deadlines? And there are a couple of things about the deadlines that are shown on this slide. These are the deadlines from the past cycle, but you'll notice that they all fall during 1 week in October. So again, next year, the dates are going to differ, but they are going to fall in October. And you'll also see that the particular day that it's due is dependent upon the topic, sort of the broad area of research. And so you want to be cognizant of that and make sure you're aiming for the correct deadline. One thing that I want to note is that if in applying you need accessibility accommodations, you should contact info@nsfgrfp.org, but you need to do so in advance so that NSF can make sure that the accommodation is lined up appropriately in time for you to take advantage of it. Okay, next slide. Just to give you an indication of how the process flows, as I mentioned, sort of mid to late October is when the applications are due. Shortly thereafter, those reference letters that you're going to need to support your application are due. And then, assuming everyone here is an undergraduate, of course, one thing that you need to have done, or you will need to be doing in the midst of this process, is make sure to apply to graduate school. Because in order to accept the fellowship, you need to be entering or in a graduate program the fall that the fellowship would start. Now, the fellowship offers go out late March, early April. As Dr. Hill mentioned, they for this round, they actually went out last week. And then fellows get a chance to, or those who receive an offer get a chance to some weeks to decide whether or not they're going to accept it. And then if they do agree to accept the fellowship, whether they're going to start accepting the stipend in the first year. And then, as I mentioned, early September, so starting September 1 is when the new fellowship year begins. Okay, next slide. Okay, let's talk about the statements. Next slide. Okay, now the first statement that I mentioned here is the one on personal relevant background and goals. So you've got 3 pages that's submitted as a PDF. One thing to be aware of is that in the solicitation, it gives you explicit instructions about the formatting, the font used, the margins, the size of the font, all of that stuff. Make sure that it's compliant with those rules that are listed in this solicitation, or we actually will provide, you can download a template for all of this. You've got to be compliant. Everything goes through an automated check. If your margins are too wide, if it goes beyond 3 pages, anything like that, it will be rejected. And so you could have invested a huge amount of time in something that just will not even be reviewed. Okay. Okay, so sorry about being a downer. So getting back to the statement. In this particular one, you've got 3 pages to give your background, but I think more importantly, you need to think about what is your story? How did you get here? What motivates you to go on to graduate school, and what motivates you to work in the particular area that you're interested in? This can be professional, this could be personal, some combination of both. And it's a way to introduce yourself to the reviewers and make the argument that it's a good idea for the National Science Foundation to invest in you. So when you're thinking about the statement, if you're in a section about career aspirations and future goals, like I mentioned, what are your experiences? Why are you intending to do whatever it is that you're setting out to do? And then you want to talk about your experience, how you were prepared to do this. So what sort of experience do you have, for example, in the lab? What was your project? What was your role in it? How did you become involved? Were you deeply involved in one project during the entire time, or that you've been studying, or have you moved from lab to lab? Any summer experiences, internships, things of this sort. You want to make sure, though, to communicate that if you spend time pursuing this, why was it important? Why was it worth your time? What did you learn? What was your contribution to the project? And this is more, I think the earlier you are in the process, in your trajectory, it's a little bit more difficult to take your contribution and fit it into the whole. So I know from personal experience, sometimes you get really focused on what it is that you're doing. And in order to get the reviewers to understand the importance of the particular thing that you did, you're going to need to place it within a context, some sort of framework, and that'll help them understand why you were doing what you were doing. Okay, next slide. The second statement is the research statement. Here you have 2 pages. And this is where you select a problem, something you might want to address. You give sufficient background so that the reviewer can understand why it would be important to tackle it. You want to give background information and make the correct citations to the appropriate literature to show you understand the background. And then you want to suggest how you would attack it. So what's the idea? What's the approach? What's the research plan? What methods would you use? Part of it is it realistic? Is it likely that you would be able to accomplish it in the time, in a regular graduate school experience? And then, how would you know that you successfully completed this? And then what might you do next? So it's important to understand, though, that while this is a research plan and lays out a series of experiments that you could do if you were a graduate student, it does not require you to actually do these experiments. So you might be saying to yourself, I don't even know where I'm going to be going to graduate school. I don't know who my thesis advisor is going to be. How would I do this? That's okay. You can take what you've been working on, provided you get approval from whoever your mentor is, and build something out from that. So not that you would actually do these experiments, but it helps the reviewer understand how you think, how well prepared you are, and the kind of work that you might be doing if you were to receive the fellowship and go off to graduate school. So it's important to realize, okay, you want to avoid jargon. This is basic communication, right? So you want to communicate for non-specialists. Now, the reviewers are actually experts in the field, sort of broadly defined, but just because somebody identifies themselves with the same basic label as far as their scientific field goes does not mean they're going to understand the specifics of whatever you're talking about. I'm in a department of biology, and I'm sure that I end up talking what sounds like nonsense to some of my colleagues. Well, generally sound like I'm talking nonsense, you can ask Dr. Hill, but communication has got to be clear. And also one thing that you need to understand is that for both the personal statement and the research statement, you want to keep in mind, and you need to specifically address both of NSF's merit review criteria, that is how these things are judged. One of those the criterion it's intellectual merit, and the other would be broader impacts. And you need to have separate sections with headings in those statements that address these two things. Okay, next slide. Okay, we're going to get around specifically to those review criteria here in just a little bit. Just a couple of quick things. The rest of the application, the reference letters. So there's a section where you list people who are going to submit letters of recommendation for you. In order to go ahead in the process, you have to list 3 names at a minimum. In order for your application to be reviewed, 2 of those letters have to come in. Now, one thing that you can do, however, is list up to 5 potential references with their contact information. If 3 or more letters are received, 3 letters will be included in the packet that is reviewed by the reviewers. Now, the way this works is that, say you've got 5 people, but 3 of them know you really well, and maybe one of them you took a course with, and another one is somebody who oversaw, I don't know, you were an RA for or something. You list the reference letter writers in the order that you would like the letters, well, essentially the order that they would be valuable to your application. And of course, those who can write a detailed letter about your intellectual contributions, that's going to be better than those who say, well, it was a big class, but this person did really well. When the letters come in, the system automatically ticks down from the top. So if you have more than 3 letters submitted, it's going to take the top 3 according to your ranking that were submitted. Now, the reason this is advantageous, of course, is if you were to only list 3 people and 2 of them ended up being sick and could not submit that letter, then your application would not be reviewed. So here's a way that you can better ensure that enough letters will come in and they will be actually considered in the order that you would like to see them considered. One last thing for the application, the transcripts. And you have to have a bachelor's degree transcript. If you are at time of application in a graduate degree program, you need to have a transcript from that as well. But just in general, realize that you need transcripts from all degree granting programs that you've been enrolled in for the entire time you've been in higher education. However, official or unofficial, it doesn't matter to us, but you do need to have them submitted. Okay, next slide. Okay, now getting back around to it, review criteria. So it's important that you understand what the reviewers are trying to prioritize and how they're reviewing things so that you can make sure that your 2 statements address what it is that they're looking for. And the 2 criteria are intellectual merit and broader impacts. For intellectual merit, the proposed activity, and in this case, that's going to be your graduate education. How important is that to advancing knowledge within the field and across different scientific fields? The broader impacts, how does the proposed activity, again, your graduate education, benefit society or advance desired societal outcomes? So next slide. We have many components of the application. We ask the reviewers to engage in a comprehensive review. So it's not that everybody gets fixated on the transcripts and your GPA. That would be inappropriate. We ask them to engage in a comprehensive, holistic approach, and they give consideration to all the components, okay, according to those two review criteria. Next slide. So, intellectual merit. What things count as intellectual merit? Well, again, potential to advance knowledge. So, is there evidence that you can do the work and do it well? So, do you have a relevant background? If you look at the transcripts, did you do well? And did you have, were the courses that you took appropriate to whatever you're proposing to do? Is there evidence that you can plan and conduct research? Have you worked both independently and as a member of a team? And, what other information is there described in your research statement and in your personal statement that would suggest that you can communicate research, that you can take initiatives, that you have taken as a whole, what you need to advance the field. Again, you need to have this, you want this sort of woven throughout the personal statement, the research plan, and that initial form where it describes your experiences, your degree programs, everything like that. Okay, next slide. Regarding broader impacts, this is a little squishier maybe. So what's the potential impact of funding you and your graduate work? Well, it varies broadly. Just realize that it's up to you to define it. It could be that your funding you would increase participation of underrepresented groups, women, persons with disabilities, veterans. That could be because there would be broader participation because you belong to one of these groups, or because you've got a track record of working to increase diversity in academics and in STEM. Is there evidence of outreach? Did you mentor somebody in the lab? Did you go out to schools and do some interact with school students, elementary, high school students, or work with the public to try to increase scientific literacy, anything of this sort? So what's in your history that suggests that by funding you, it's going to be beneficial to society? And again, information on this should turn up in all these different places. Okay, next slide. So that's about it. Again, here are, we have down here in the lower left, a couple of websites where you can get more information. And after you review the material, if you have questions, you can always send an email to info@nsfgrfp.org. And with that, we can take some questions.